MG Video is pleased to present DIY car bodywork the easy way with Mike Smith. Mike has spent some 20 years in the motor trade, specialising in body repairs and used vehicle preparation. His work ranges from the smallest of jobs to panel replacement and total resprays. During this programme, he will concentrate on the type of work which can be undertaken without expensive specialised equipment. He will show you trade tips and techniques, methods which can save time and money, whilst enhancing the appearance of your vehicle. You may find it helpful to rewind the tape from time to time in order to study certain sections of the film.
Hello, I'm Mike Smith. During the course of this programme I hope to show you step by step the various methods that we use for repairing body damage, such as this. Although this is collision damage, most of the methods apply equally as well to corrosion. Where there is a difference I'll show you. But before we start, I'd like to just show you one or two items of equipment that we'll be using, and also to discuss one or two very important safety aspects. This is ordinary sandpaper, 40 grit and 80 grit. Wet and dry sandpaper, 180 grit and 800 grit. And a simple rubber sanding block. A hammer and a block of wood, a screwdriver and a wood screw, and a pair of pliers, a sheet of aluminium mesh and a pair of tin snips, a couple of paint brushes, a pot of rust cure, ordinary body filler and bridging filler which contains fiberglass, a roll of masking tape about 1 inch wide and newspapers, some card for mixing the filler on, and a plastic bag. A face mask which will offer some degree of protection from dust, etc. A pair of safety glasses or goggles, essential when working in flaky, corroded areas. We shall also be using various rubbing compounds, primers, etc. Always ensure that the garage door or window is left partly open for ventilation. Open the bonnet out of harm's way and cover the engine compartment to protect it from dust. Please remember, when using any of the products shown in this programme, always follow the health and safety instructions on the label. The first job is to try to ease out the dent a little. Had the damage been in this area, we could have gently tapped the wing from behind with the hammer, whilst holding the wooden block with the other hand. But at the top of the wing, there is not enough clearance for a hammer, so we must use another method. Insert the wood screw point first from behind the wing. Be careful, jagged metal can cut. The screw is then pulled with the pliers to ease out the damaged area. If this was a dent without a hole, we would drill a couple of small holes insert a self-tapping screw and then pull with the pliers in the same way. Inserting the wood behind the hole, gently tap the dent to ensure that no part of the damaged area sticks out beyond the surrounding metal. Otherwise, the final repair may stand out and look obvious. Using a piece of 40 grit sandpaper, which we fold in two, we now sand the immediate area beyond the damage to provide a key for the body filler. Try to contain the sanding to within about an inch of the dent. It is important to also key the bare metal itself, otherwise the filler may crack and flake off. Wipe the area thoroughly with a clean cloth to remove any dust. The wing has a pinstripe just beneath our repair, so we must carefully mask this off prior to the next process. Always take your time masking. It's a good idea to practice on another area of the vehicle. A poor masking job can ruin a good repair. Before applying the rust cure, read the instructions for application, drying times, etc. Ensure that the area is thoroughly coated and brush plenty into the hole itself. Whilst this is drying, I will show you one or two of the methods that we use for supporting body filler. For the first one, we cut a piece of aluminium mesh slightly larger than the hole which we are filling. We now need to mix some body filler and hardener. Once again, follow all instructions on the label. And always replace the lid to keep out dust and to preserve the filler. Try to estimate the amount of filler needed, but if uncertain, mix less rather than more. If the weather is extremely cold, use a little more hardener, and vice versa in warm weather. The filler and hardener must be thoroughly mixed until a uniform colour is obtained, otherwise the filler will not cure evenly, resulting in parts remaining soft and unworkable. The filler is then applied to the surface of the gauze. This would then be held in position with one hand behind the wing. The filler is pushed into the hole, and when hard, the gauze would stay permanently in position. Another method, particularly when the hole is larger, is to force a plastic bag behind the repair. The filler is then applied as before, and when hard, the bag is removed. Always remember to clean your spreader before the filler hardens. I generally use a newspaper and an old cloth. To do our repair, I have decided to use the bridging filler. It is less porous than normal filler and will support itself in a small hole. It is mixed in exactly the same way as ordinary filler. As with most car body products, avoid skin contact. Again, we mix until a uniform colour is obtained. The bridger is pushed into the hole. Its main purpose is to provide a base for the body filler. Try to ensure that you don't leave an excess of bridging filler on the surrounding metal. It is not easy to sand. Clean your spreader immediately after use and allow a good half hour for the filler to harden, longer in cool conditions. This is just a little method I use had the damage been at the wing edge by the door. When sanding a repair in this area, it is easy to slip and scratch the paintwork because there is literally no clearance between the two panels. Apply several widths of masking tape and then build them up until they are several layers thick. If you now open the door, there is a gap which gives us a margin for error. And if you do slip with the sandpaper, the masking tape should prevent any damage to the paintwork. Before sanding the bridger, we need to fit a piece of 40 grit to the rubbing block. Make sure that the paper is firmly located on the small metal pins. Be careful, these things can bite. Cover the wheel and tyre with an old sheet or something similar. Taking a used piece of 40 grit, carefully break the surface of the filler. I find the coating forms on all body fillers, which can rapidly ruin a new piece of sandpaper. With the 40 grit on the block, gently flap the filler, making sure to remove all traces from the surrounding area. Wipe the repair with a clean cloth. Using the same method as before, mix an application of body filler. We now start to give the repair some shape. Apply the filler carefully, a little at a time. Gently drag the spreader over the surface. If you can see any air holes, try to fill them. But above all, don't apply an excessive amount of filler. Carefully chamfer the edges. This will help prevent any lifting and cracking during sanding. The filler must now be left to harden for at least half an hour. Using an old piece of 40 grit, carefully break the surface of the filler. Having done this, start to block sand the repair. Be very careful not to catch the masking tape or go too far beyond the edge of the filler. Tap and turn the block occasionally to prevent it from clogging. When sanding, do not press too hard, let the paper do the work. Wipe the dust away from time to time to view your progress. If you look closely at the repair, you will notice that there are low spots and areas where the shape doesn't feel right. Another application of filler is required. This time, when applying the filler, allow the spreader to partly rest on the surrounding area, using it as a shape pattern. Apply the filler slowly and gently. Once again, carefully chamfer the edges. Having allowed the filler time to harden, we again break the surface. This time we have a piece of 80 grit, ordinary sandpaper, on the rubbing block. It is less abrasive and gives a smoother finish than 40 grit. Take great care not to catch the edge of the masking tape. Check the repair frequently and sand very gently. You will begin to feel it taking shape. A check now reveals that there are still a couple of spots where the level of the filler is below the surrounding area. What is needed now is a fine skim of filler, which should be sufficient to do the job. Apply the filler slowly and carefully. This will be our final application. Although for larger repairs, 6 or 7 mixes is not unusual. Just a little reminder to clean the spreader and make sure that lids have been replaced. To sand this last application of filler, we will use a piece of 180 grit wet and dry on the rubbing block. This gives us a better surface finish and will flat some of the sanding scratches from the surrounding area. Once again, mind your fingers. Having broken the surface, carefully start to sand the filler. The surface will begin to feel much smoother. Any remaining scratches will be dealt with during the next process. This is cellulose primer, which can be found at your local motorist shop. We are going to brush it onto the repair. If your brand of primer seems very thin, pour a little into an open top container. Leave overnight and the thinners will evaporate, causing the primer to thicken. Always use a good, clean brush. Cellulose primer will start to become thicker as you apply it. This is a good point, as it allows us to build up one coat on top of another, ending up with a good thick coating which will cover virtually all scratches. Although this looks very rough, don't worry, it is easy to flat. Whilst the primer hardens, I am going to show you how to deal with body corrosion. This wing is badly corroded here and here. There are also several scabs such as this, which when tapped will become holes. The way to deal with this corrosion is to gently tap the metal surrounding the hole, making sure that no area protrudes above the level of the wing. During this type of work, always wear eye protection. Treat all other holes and scabs in the same manner, but do not hammer too hard, otherwise you can create extra work for yourself. The next stage is to carefully remove any flaky metal and small scabs from the area of the holes. If you have a hand grinder, this will speed up the process, but be careful not to grind away too much. Continue to remove all scabs from the corroded areas. Although slower than a grinder, a screwdriver is a good controllable tool for doing this type of work. We now sand the area around our repairs to provide a key for the body filler. Taking a large screwdriver, scrape away any loose metal and dirt from beneath the wing. Having wiped the repair with a cloth, apply a coat of rust cure. To fill the first hole, I am using the aluminium mesh method, which I described earlier. With the mesh in position behind the hole, the filler is pushed into the repair. Don't worry if this first application looks a little rough. Try to chamfer the edges. For the other holes, the filler is supported by the plastic bag beneath the wing. Try to apply the filler as neatly as possible. But with a repair such as this, it's easier said than done. Having allowed the filler time to set, break the surface before starting to block sand with 40 grit. Continue sanding until the level of the filler is not above that of the surrounding metal. After this stage of sanding, the paper should be replaced with a piece of 80 grit, ordinary sandpaper. Although further applications are needed, the plastic bag can now be removed from beneath the wing. This time, the filler is somewhat easier to apply, because the previous application provides us with a good base. When sanding, try to form the wing profile on edges such as this. It is sometimes helpful to use the sandpaper without the block. Although the repairs now look much better, further filling is still required. This time, try to be a little neater with the filler, and remember to chamfer the edges. We now flat the filler with 180 grit wet and dry, used dry. Once the cellulose primer has been applied, our corrosion repair will be at exactly the same stage as the collision repair, to which we now return. Before attempting to flat the brush primer, make absolutely certain that it has hardened. For this flatting process, we are using 180 grit wet and dry, with warm water and washing up liquid. Now is a good time to remove any dust from the area. Wet the paper thoroughly. And sand the repair in the same manner as before. The process continues until the surface feels really smooth and level. Do not rub too hard. The idea is to leave a little of the cellulose primer on the surface to fill any scratches. Dry the wing completely before the next stage. The engine cover can now be removed, and whilst in the area, check the paint colour code, which is normally on a plate beneath the bonnet. If in doubt, consult your dealer. Remove the old piece of masking tape which has become wet. The vehicle must now be carefully masked. Extra care taken now will pay dividends. Once again, it is a good idea to practice on another part of the car. Make certain that any areas of the vehicle which are likely to be affected by overspray are thoroughly protected. Using a mild liquid cutting solution, we now rub the area around our repair. This not only cleans the paintwork, but helps to provide a key for the spray primer. Remove all traces of the solution with a clean, dry cloth. The pinstripe is now remasked, as the original piece was wet and unserviceable. I use another piece of newspaper here for extra protection. The final piece of masking is now applied, which prevents us from needlessly priming beyond this point. Before using any aerosol, always do a test spray to ensure that the nozzle is not blocked. This is also a chance to practice your technique. We are aiming to finish priming in this area here. Always shake the can well and apply thin, light coats in a side-to-side motion. I would advise at least half an hour between coats. Do not try to apply too much primer at once. 5 or 6 applications will be needed. By using quick, thin coats, the risk of paint runs is greatly reduced. If a run did occur, it would need to be left overnight and then carefully flatted with 800 grit wet and dry and washing up liquid. After the final coat, the primer must be left overnight to harden. In fact, the longer the better. To flat the spray primer, we use a piece of 800 grit wet and dry on the block. Remove the side masking paper. We will reposition this later, prior to top coat spraying. Wet the block thoroughly and start to flat the repair. Do not press too hard. Once again, let the paper do the work. Because the shape of the wing is not perfectly flat, it is now wise to use the paper without the block. Take great care not to rub through on edges such as this. Continue sanding until the surface feels really smooth. And be sure to flat this bottom edge, which is often neglected. Having dried the area, once more apply and remove some liquid cutting solution. We again replace the masking in the pinstripe area. The side masking is repositioned a foot or so from the edge of the primer. When spraying, make sure that you finish each coat at least 3 inches away from this paper. Always check that the masking is firmly in position before spraying. I normally spray the edge of the paper to clear the nozzle before each coat. Use quick, light coats with the button gently pressed. We are aiming to slightly overlap the primer. Please allow at least half an hour between coats. An aerosol is far more controllable than might be imagined, and sometimes pressing the button too hard can result in an excess of paint, causing paint runs. Continue using quick, light strokes, and if the paint finish appears too dry, slow down your movement a little, but not too much, otherwise runs may form. If a paint run does occur, it will need to be left overnight and then be carefully wet flatted with 800 grit before you can continue. The secret with spraying is a quick side-to-side movement. Apply 6 or 7 coats of paint, and please remember to leave at least half an hour between each application. Having left the paint overnight to harden, it is now time to carefully unmask the area. We now use a coarse cutting compound to give a really nice finish to our repair, and also to remove the overspray from this dry area here. Apply a little compound with a clean cloth and rub quite vigorously. But keep an eye on what you are doing. It is possible to rub through the paint back to the primer, in which case the spraying process would have to be repeated. Rub until the compound virtually disappears. You should begin to see a nice gloss finish. Be very careful not to rub through the paint on the top wing edge. Remove any traces of compound with a soft, clean cloth. Having applied and removed an application of liquid cutting solution, the final task to obtain that perfect finish is to apply a coat of good quality car wax. Whilst you're at it, why not give the whole car a treat? And remember to allow plenty of time to admire your handiwork. Finally, don't forget to apply an underbody protective coating to the underside of the repair. This will help to keep out moisture and to protect the repair. Well, that's about it for this programme, and I feel sure that if you follow the methods and techniques which I've shown you, you will be able to carry out a satisfactory repair. But it's always worth remembering that the greater the time and effort, the better the end result. Oh, I suppose you're wondering how we went on with the corrosion repair. Let's come and take a look.
work.